Hi, everyone, and welcome to yet another really special Talking Insomnia episode. We have Ryan with us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. Looking forward to talking with you. And just so, for a little context for the audience, I sent this newsletter that was titled like the Post Insomnia Blues. And you replied to that, told me a little bit about your story. And you said that you found, interviews like this so helpful that you would like to share your story, although you felt like the struggle was not necessarily like 100% in the rear view mirror. So that's kind of what you told me. And I was like, yeah, of course, let's talk, Ryan. So that's the context for everyone tuning in here. But with that said, tell us in your words, how did your struggle with insomnia begin?
Well, first, I just want to say that, initially I thought that I wouldn't contact you because my path to recovery has been very complicated, let's say, and very long. And so because I watched a lot of these videos a year ago, right? And they were really helpful to me. So that was my motivation. Like, okay, I want to give back to the community that gave me so much. So that's why I wanted to do this. But then on the other hand, I was doubting myself. Like I didn't have the trajectory that a lot of your guests have had where they, had the decrease in fear and then suddenly they were sleeping great. Like I've had a lot of ups and downs and I don't know. So I'll tell you more about that. But I just felt like it wasn't as clean of a story as other people have experienced. I take it like your viewers will just have to decide for themselves if there's something useful. But that was kind of my motivation. Like on the one hand, I thought I want to give back, but on the other hand, I thought, well, I'm not sure if it's as clean as usual. So,
No, I it's hard to interrupt, but I just have to interject really, really quickly there and say that I'm kind of extra grateful for you being a guest here because I think so many people will resonate with that. Actually, so many people tell me that when I watch this interviews, it seems so easy, like it was kind of so clean, as you said. But paradoxically, like for the people who are guests, often tell me similar to you on beforehand that like my story is quite complex and a lot of up and down. So I wouldn't surprise me, Ryan, if some people watch this and say like, "Oh, Ryan's story seems quite easy," but because it's in the when they see you now, it may be hard to imagine how difficult it was. But anyway, now I'm leading on the sidetrack. So yeah, back to you, Ryan.
okay. So I want to first, I'm going to go back a little bit. So when I was like about 10 years ago, I had an episode of pretty bad insomnia. I would fall asleep fine, and then I would wake up like at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so I would, I'd go to bed like around 10 and wake up at 2. And I was really stressed because I always prioritized my sleep. So I had my whole life, basically, I had set myself up for an insomnia battle because even when I was younger, like when I was in my 20s, I would never, like party all night because I would feel terrible the next day. Some of my friends referred to me as like being an old man, like, oh, this old man has to go to bed soon. Um, so yeah, I mean, I really like in my mind, like sleep was paramount to having good health and feeling well and productive and alive. And a bad night of sleep was just the worst thing ever, right? So that's the setup. So 10 years ago, I was going through a separation, whatever, and I wasn't sleeping well, and I couldn't take trazodone, and then the doctor put me on mirtazapine or Remeron, and that like really knocked me out, and it worked really well. So I took it for about 3 months, and then I just kind of weaned myself off, and then I was back to good sleeping. But I have to say, I was never that focused on like how many hours did I get, but I just knew that I'd fall asleep promptly, and I wake up, and I felt refreshed most days, and got out of bed, and was fine. So then like 2 years ago, I was going through some stress. There, I mean, so I have a mood disorder, and so I had that, and then the insomnia kind of compounded it, and then I had some stress at work. Like my staff were constantly calling me, and I don't know what exactly led to it, but basically I ended up having like really bad insomnia, and so I found your channel late. So I did everything I shouldn't do. I quit my job. I stopped doing everything. I like felt so miserable because I would sleep like 2 to 3 hours a night. And I just felt horrible constantly. Like, oh my God, this is the worst thing that could ever happen to me. Right. Like, and I mean, my depression got really bad. It was just really, truly the lowest I've ever felt in my entire life. Like I was like, I have no quality of life. I don't want to be here anymore. So it got very dark. And then initially I had reached, or you know how YouTube sends you things. And so I'd seen something by Martin, your friend. And I think I had written to him. And at that time, I was kind of misdiagnosed with a different mood disorder, and he said, like, that's kind of a special case. You need to, you need to see a doctor about that. Um, but over time, and like so I was misdiagnosed, and I was treated for the wrong things, taking the wrong medications, and nothing was working. I mean, I tried, I think, every drug for insomnia. I mean, and because I'm a kind of person that is like, oh, I have a problem. I need to fix this. Like, how do I fix this? And there's no, like, just kind of take a break. But that sort of anxiety underneath everything has, well, I have a therapist, and I've been talking to him about it, and we kind of think it's related to this like dog attack trauma that I had when I was very young, and kind of set me up for like the world is dangerous. Um, but that anxiety, I've always kind of used it to, push myself and do well, right? Like I did well in school. I was always very conscientious about my obligations and things like that. And so I didn't really see the negative of it. It just felt like part of my personality. It wasn't until I met my therapist, because when I went to my therapist and I said, I have depression, he goes, but I'm reading anxiety on you. And I was like, what? I don't have anxiety, I have depression, and I have insomnia, and I need to fix it. And he's like, so you had a bad night of sleep, and like, you can just have a bad night of sleep. And I'm like, this guy does not understand, right? Like, I had a bad night of sleep, and I feel terrible, and my life's miserable because of it. So I've been working with him for like 2 years now, and I have a better understanding. And then your channel really helped me, and all your guests really helped me. But okay, sorry, I'm kind of getting a little jumbled, but they're all these things are related. So so I'm having this really bad period of insomnia, sleeping like 2 hours, of trying every medication. I mean, I tried Ambien. And so the first night of Ambien, I slept like 6 hours, and I was like, yes, this is going to work for me. The second night, I slept like 2 hours. Well, it wasn't, so I didn't take it right away because I was a little bit worried about, the addiction to the medication or whatever. So then I tried that again, like a week later or something, and I only slept like 2 hours. And then I took it again, and I slept like 1 hour. And I go, okay, the Ambien doesn't work. And then I took a Lunesta, Zopiclone, I think is the name for that. And it was kind of like the same pattern. I tried like marijuana gummies for a week, and the first day it would kind of seem to work, and then it would wane. I tried Seroquel, and people are like, oh, I can't take Seroquel. I feel like it knocks me out for 12 hours. And I'm like, I slept 3. I mean, I really tried like anything. I went back to the mirtazapine. That was my first thing, right? Because the mirtazapine worked for me seemingly 10 years ago. So I was like,
Yeah.
why isn't this working? Right. And it just fueled the anxiety, right? Because like nothing was working. And then, so yeah, I went through that for like about a year. And then I found your channel.
And sorry to interrupt there, Ryan, but at some point you decided to quit your job, and what were your days like then? Were you kind of what were your days like at that point?
I mean, I shut down my life. Like I basically didn't make plans to do anything, because I was like, I'm going to feel probably so terrible tomorrow. I can't do anything. Like I wouldn't even make plan for a week away. Right. Or everything was like, I'm not sleeping well. We'll have to see how it goes. I mean, that's why I'm saying I did everything wrong. Like I shut down my whole life. I didn't want to function. I just was on the couch a lot. I mean, I was just constantly stressing. I did exercise because I was like, well, at least, anybody who's had insomnia, if you tell somebody, they're like, well, have you tried exercise? Like, yes. And when I would exercise, sometimes I would like exercise like a lot. And then it's like, I would sleep even worse. Right. Yeah, I mean, you know, all the suggestions that people tell you when you're having sleep problems is like, no, that's not going to help. And then when it doesn't help, right, then it's like, I'm really broken. Like, I'm so broken that all these things that are meant to help can't even help me. Like, that's how broken I am.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so my life was just like, I just stopped it. You know, I was just miserable. I mean, it was horrible. So I really didn't have much of a life, and I just felt awful, like, the next day because I wouldn't sleep, and then some days I would sleep, like, 40 minutes, right? Oh, and then I got the, you know, "Oh, wear one of those sleep trackers." That really helped. Because 'Cause I'm looking every night, "How many hours did I get? 4, 5." Right? And I think I had also because before I ever had insomnia, I had, like, I always thought I slept pretty well, and I always thought I got like 7 to 8 hours. And so then when I started tracking, it was like, "Oh, I only got 5 hours. I only got 4 hours," right? And that may have been the case before, but I never really monitored, right? So then with the sleep tracker, and you know, I knew that it wasn't maybe 100% accurate, but I like just constantly monitoring.
Yeah.
And so that,
And
yeah.
did you run into, like, CBT-I? Did you try that, or did that ever pop up?
Oh yeah, and that does. I'm not a fan of CBT in general. My therapist and I have talked about this. Like, CBT is this kind of, because it's sort of like prepackaged and can be done in like 4 or 5 weeks. It's used in a lot of research. So then it becomes evidence based. But the
Exactly.
problem is that it's like, this is like your prepackaged treatment, and then you see some benefit, and it's like, okay, it's evidence based, right? But it never. I mean, I even was in like this uh, kind of like group therapy program, and you know, they focused a lot on DBT and CBT, and yeah, so I did get the what is it called, like, there's an app from the Veterans Association, and
Oh,
so
yeah. I think it's just called CBT-I Coach.
yeah, I used that, and then I used some other handout that I don't know if it was from Martin or not, but, you know, so I did all the tracking. "Oh, I gotta go to bed later," and I would be like, "I'm so tired, but I gotta stay up till 11." And then, you know, it's like all this pressure, like, you gotta go to bed late, and then you gotta wake up early no matter what. And so then I was trying to do that, and I was so miserable, and then I would spend, like, before that, I was spending, like, 10 to 12 hours in bed trying to get some sleep, right? Like I said, I just did everything possible that you would recommend don't do. I did all those things. Um, yeah, so CBTI did not help me. And when I talked to my therapist about it, it was like, yeah, his kind of advice for me was to lay off, because my tendency is like, something's wrong, I need to fix it. And if I'm not responding, it's like I double down on it. Like, oh, look at you did the thing that you're supposed to do and you're still not. So then even more pressure, right? So like layers of pressure. Okay. So then I find your channel and I read your book twice. And then I decided, like, I'm just gonna get off all these meds. Like, I don't want to be on any of these meds. It's not gonna work. I mean, they don't work anyway, right? So then I tried, like, okay, I'm just gonna read my set it and forget it. And then I'm gonna go to sleep and see how it goes. And then I was sleeping like 2 to 3 hours a night, not feeling very great. But I was kind of like, I'm gonna fix this. I'm gonna fix this the sleep coach way. Right. So again, that same pattern, right? Anything I could use to fix it. Like, that was my mentality. And so I did that for a while. And then I mean, I started sleeping like maybe 3 to 4 hours a night. So I wasn't really satisfied with that. And then I read your book again, and I watched hundreds of your like the videos on your channel. That was like my homework every day. Um, so then, but then I just kind of like burned myself out on it, right? And I was like, forget it. I just need to put this away. And then the pressure was, don't think about it during the day, because that's going to make me have a bad night's sleep. So then I had this I went through that for a little while. And then I don't know what happened. Like at the beginning of this year, I was like, screw it. I'm going back on Dave Vigo. So I've tried, oh, I should also say I've tried Balsamra and Dave Vigo. I felt like Dave Vigo kind of helped me a little more. So then I was like, I'm going back on this medication. Like, I don't care. I just need some sleep. So I did that. Um, and then I took that for a few months. But so while all of this is going on, I also had the depression anxiety issue. And so I've now found like the right medication combo for me that works. And so this is where I say it's kind of complicated, because I feel like a lot of the a lot of the people on your channel don't want to be on anything, and they're like just in general, I would say, and especially American culture, there's a lot of like, if it's natural, it's better, right? And I sort of don't think that way as much anymore. I'm like, natural is bad vision, but I got LASIK, right? Or I wore glasses, right? Like, if that's going to improve my quality of life and it's not giving me a lot of bad side effects, better living through chemistry. So I'm kind of like, whatever works, let's do that. But anyway, so I feel like I now have the right medication combo to manage the sort of anxiety and depression. And actually, as that started lifting, um, I think what happened is so I got sick and I was feeling really tired. And I was like, I'm just gonna see how I sleep because I feel really tired. So I'm not gonna take the day Vigo. Just gonna get off that and just see how it goes. I slept kind of okay. And then I just stopped taking it. I mean, I'm still taking my mood management drug, but now I haven't taken like a sleep aid in a long time. Now it's been probably since March, and I've been doing really well. I've actually been doing better than ever in my life. This is a side note for like people that struggle with mental illness that like I have from the time that I was a teenager, and I'm now 46, so like 30 years, right? And I would try a little bit, and then I'd have a little side effect, and then I get off of it. And it just kind of progressively got worse over time. And then that's how I got kind of misdiagnosed. And I mean, now the Zoloft is working great for me, and I I don't have any side effects. So, and my anxiety has lifted, and I'm actually probably living better than ever. And so now my sleep is not like what I would consider great, but it's not terrible. But the biggest change is that I'm not afraid. And I heard those messages in the beginning, like, you just got to have an FU attitude to how much you sleep. And I'm like, yeah, but how do you get to that point? Because again, I had built up my whole life, right? Like, sleep is important. Like, sleep is part of a healthy lifestyle. I can't function the next day if I don't get sleep. So, you know, I can't have that attitude. And then I would hear people like on your channel and they're relaxed about it. And I was just like, I don't know how to get to that point, and I'm writing in the comments, like, how do I get there? How do I get there? Right. Like, I need the path together. Again, the fix it mentality. And so I think that's where, like, working with my therapist was really helpful, because he would just kind of keep pointing it out to me. Like, okay, you're doing that pressure thing on yourself again, and I think another thing that helped is in therapy, the way that he would react to me wasn't the way that I would react to myself. And seeing his compassion and kindness and like allowing whatever to be helped me kind of like see myself sorry, that way. So I could, you talk a lot about like kindness, like self-kindness, self-compassion. But then, again, my mind's like, where's that self-compassion? You're not doing it right? Like, you could just take anything and distort it, right? And so that, again, this is where it's kind of complicated, because I feel like, probably the medication gave me some boosts, the therapy gave me some boosts, the videos, all of that together kind of helped me come now to this place where I feel like, yeah, if I sleep poorly, I can like I can still kind of function. I may not feel great, and I just accept like I'll probably feel crappy, but I can still do some stuff, like it's not the end of the world. And so I just have a different relationship to it now. So I feel like that's the biggest change for me. And I typically fall asleep pretty quickly now. Like that was something that had really changed with this insomnia was the episode that I had 10 years ago. My problem was I would fall asleep and then wake up really early. But this time it was like both ends. Wake up really early and take 3 hours to fall asleep. And like I said, when I first found your channel, I was like, oh, I got to do it. So I'm going to watch Netflix at night. Again, I just kind of it's like my mind was always like this fix it mode. And that added to the pressure. And so, yeah, so I kind of just had to step away from it all. And then, like I said, then there was sort of that hidden pressure of like, oh, you're thinking about sleep. That's not good. Right? Like you shouldn't be doing that. But now my attitude is like, I'll have moments like that where I'm like, oh no, I'm never going to sleep again. But I'll have it for like a few minutes. And I just kind of tell myself, okay, my brain wants to go take this walk down this path. And so I'm just going to let it do that. Like you want to walk there. I know this is an ingrained path. So, let it go for a little bit. But it's like I have a little more of a casual relationship to that. I kind of see my mind doing that, and there's a little bit of distance so that I'm not all caught up in it. And so that's been really like the biggest change and why I feel like I've been so helped. So even though I don't feel like I sleep great every night, I'm definitely so overall, in terms of the sleep, I would say I'm sleeping generally around 6-ish hours plus a night. And I've learned that I can function fine on that. So it's much better than sleeping 2 hours or less. Right. But I'm just so much more relaxed about it. Like when my therapist originally told me, so you have a bad night of sleep, and like, that's okay. You can have a bad night of sleep. And I just was like, no, that doesn't compute. Like I can't have a bad night of sleep. That's not allowed. And so I don't know. I think, just kind of hearing it over and over, seeing that reflected in my therapist, it changed my relationship to myself and my thoughts. And this has helped me in like, even with my mood problem and just kind of when you got a bit of a crazy mind, you kind of go, okay, this is crazy time. Like it's just gonna do its thing. And so I just have that acceptance and that fear is lower. And so I feel like I'm just doing so much better now. And I'm really like more stable and, happier with things than I've been in a very, very long time. But it was very dark before this.
So glad to hear. It's so wonderful to hear, and so many things I would like to kind of like comment on or go back to. But maybe first question for you I have is this one, like since you emailed me, which was probably like maybe 2-3 months ago now, it sounds to me as if things have gotten like even easier than from the time you emailed me. Is that true or not really?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually like, I think as I've been less kind of constrained by that anxiety or depression, like I'm having changes that I didn't expect in other areas of my life. Like it's like the overall fear is lower. And I think I had lived with a certain level of fear like all my life, that it was really just that's my personality. And now that that's kind of like the volume has been turned down, it's just changed like my whole approach to different things. Like, if I don't get this or that, or something kind of goes wrong in the day, I just am less reactive to it. And I'm really appreciating that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I'm like, is this what normal people feel like? This is great.
No, I heard that a few times before. Like you maybe lived your life in certain kind of stress level, anxiety level that you thought this is what it feels. This is kind of normal, and then you do this kind of inner work, this inner journey, and then as you said, the anxiety levels actually come down from a lower point than what was the previous normal, and that can be really amazing. And so glad to hear that. And one thing I just want to comment on that I've never really thought of this, never heard this exactly like you said it, but how when you talk to your therapist responded in kind of like a kind, gentle, supportive way, right? And almost became like the model for how you can talk to yourself, right? Is
Yeah.
that true?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like it just reflected a way of how I could respond to my own wild thoughts, right? Or predicament. And I had always had this kind of pattern of like, no, that's not the right approach, or I shouldn't be feeling this way. And I listened to a lot of stuff on self-compassion, but for some reason I don't know if it took, like I said, I think it's a little bit of the medication, a little bit of the psychoeducation all together. It took a lot to get through this thick skull, but finally it kind of seeped in. But it took me about a year. And so, like when I was reading your book, and you don't give a definite timeline, but you kind of give sort of a suggestion. I think of about maybe 2 months or so. I can't remember right now, but and I heard these other guests and they would improve rather rapidly. And I was like, I mean, it basically took me close to a year to have that kind of change. But I'm not a spring chicken, so old dogs can't learn new tricks, right? So it took me a while to kind of really feel that. And I think Michelle had responded to one of my comments, and she said, like, it does take time, but that shift can happen. And I was just like, well, when? When is that gonna happen? I need it now. I like, not, not, but you just like it took me kind of letting it go, but that process of letting go is really hard.
Yeah.
It's like the hardest thing to do, to not try. And that's why, like, even with my therapist, he goes, like, I go, what's my homework? Right? I was always like, okay, so we've had the session. What do I do now? Right? And he's like, I don't want you to do anything. Like, I want you to just lay off, right? Like, back up. And it took a while for me to get that message, but I finally did. And I mean,
Sounds like a really like wonderful therapist. It basically have very, very similar like ideas and thoughts that we share on our channel. And does your therapist ascribe to certain kind of philosophy or methodology like ACT or something like that, or not really? They have their own kind of personal style.
yeah, well, no, Alex isn't like stuck to any particular program, or therapeutic
Yeah,
approach. I think he's very insightful in a way that like made me feel like, how could I know myself so little? Like when he pointed out that I had anxiety, I was really like, no, I don't have anxiety. This guy doesn't understand me. But now I can see it, and I can see it in my family. Like both of my sisters have anxiety, and yeah, and like especially health anxiety. Like I don't want to take these meds. Ah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
So
now,
I don't know. But he could read that, and he's very perceptive and kind. Um, I mean, we've talked like he's into philosophy, a little bit of like the Buddhist approach, a little bit of yeah, just kind of. I mean, for me, I think it was mostly about like self-acceptance at a very
yeah,
deep level.
yeah. Very nicely said. And I want to ask you, did you go back to work or find new job, new work, or what do you do now?
Well, so, with my therapist, I said, like, okay, like, I'm thinking about taking this job. One of my old colleagues had contacted me. And so I work as a data analyst for a rape crisis center, but I just work part time. And that was kind of the right first step for me. Um, so that's what I'm doing now.
Oh, so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And one other question I had for you was this one. Uh, it's actually like, randomly, like yesterday, I was in this like group coaching call, and it was like several people described very similar to you that even before they had insomnia, they had like sleep was a great priority for them. It had, become something like, I'm a good sleeper, and sleep is important for me. And I need to, and a question for you is like, do you think that idea or mindset, if you will, came from sort of like insight from some type of internal experience you had, or more from the quote unquote propaganda, from society, like you got to sleep and et cetera, et cetera? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, like, okay, so I think the narratives that we come to understand about ourselves in therapy, may or may not be 100% or even 50% true. But I
Right.
think that that's not really the thing that matters so much. It can feel like it matters, but I think what that helps you do is to understand yourself in a different kind of way, where it's almost like you need a little proof that you deserve that compassion. Right. And so I think, like I said, with that dog attack that I had at a very young age, I learned like the world is dangerous and I need to have some kind of control. Right. And so the way I can control it is eating a good diet, having good sleep, getting some exercise, like doing well in school, like all of these things. And society does reward you for that, right? It's like, oh, good for this, good for this, good for that. And so it reinforces that behavior. It reinforces that anxiety that you use to fuel yourself forward. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's both of those things, but
Yeah.
it helped me to kind of, it's almost like looking at yourself like as a kid. So he goes, like my therapist told me, so you have a kid that's traumatized and is crying. And is your response to that kid, "You shouldn't cry about this." And I was like, "God, that's awful," right? But that is what I was doing.
Yeah.
And other things like that I experienced. My life hasn't been like super easy outside of that, but that was kind of like a very formative experience when I was very, very young, right? And I was defenseless.
Yeah.
So, and I couldn't understand. Like I basically had a major phobia of dogs, and even now, if they make that kind of growl that sounds very vicious, there's a part of me for a moment that's like, and then I have to go, okay, okay, I'm not in danger. I'm not.
Yeah.
So that's like left a scar. But yeah, just develop this relationship with myself where it was like, got to control things. And then when myself would get out of control, there's a problem. It's indicative of your brokenness, things like that. So I would say, yeah, it's kind of like workaholism, how you can be a workaholic, but that's so rewarded and people are always like, yeah, hard work, like that's to prove that you have worth in life. And so it does come from society too. But yeah, I had like, even with vegetables, it's always been the thing, like, gotta have my 5 vegetables a day. And now I'm kind of like, okay, I mean, I still want to get my vegetables in and I feel better when I do, but if I don't, I'm not going to freak out about it. And that's what I mean. Like, it's had this kind of retraining, or whatever you want to call it, in my psyche, has allowed me to approach various things with a more relaxed attitude about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very insightful answer. And another thing that struck me when you were talking about your therapist was how, you know, um, Alex, I think it was like saying, like, kind of repeatedly sort of pointing out, I'm sure in a very gentle and nice way, the kind of like the pressure and the efforts, and like, but you're pushing yourself, and it just reminds me of like the work I do and we do here is very much about sort of like just pointing out to people, like, this, they people ask, like, should I do this? And then, like, you're always kind of like, you could, but it's a matter of intent. Like, are you trying to kind of make yourself sleep or not? Like, is this an effort? Like, is this an effort? Like, and I think a lot when it becomes very clear to someone, like, wait, like, all these efforts or all the pressure I'm putting on myself, that is actually a big reason I struggle. Then it doesn't become like, oh, how do I stop myself from doing all this to myself? It becomes more like, aha, okay, now I see. And then that, like, the pressure kind of naturally fades away. So just a little comment, but does that sound familiar?
Yeah, I mean, in one sense, I think it's like important to point out and say, like, maybe the suggestion would be, go ahead and do that thing. You'll learn after repeated attempts that that's not going to help, but
Yeah.
you can see that you're trying to fix it, you're trying to control it. It's that intent, because then that thing about saying, you know, what you're trying to do is trying to make a an attempt to control your sleep. So then you're like, "Oh, I need to not do that." So you're trying to find like a secret. Your mind tries to find a way like, "How do I do that without trying to do that?" Right?
Exactly, yeah.
And so it's so maybe one suggestion is just like, go for it. Try it until you feel like this doesn't work and you kind of burn yourself out on it, right? Like if you want to go for it, go for it. But
Now
just
that's
notice,
so
just
again,
notice
so
what
it's
the intent is.
so insightful, and that's I call it like feedback, like painful feedback. Like you try and then you get so yeah, exactly. Wow. Now, you already, one question I also have for guests is, talking about how what we can learn from these struggles can impact, can have a big impact on life, and you already shared a lot on that subject. But another question I want to ask guests is, what if you could, travel back in time and tell yourself something when you were, in the midst of this struggle? What would you tell yourself?
Yeah, well, I would have taken myself to your channel earlier because that was helpful and like I, there's so many messages about how important sleep is. But I think this is more for people that think that sleep is not important. So they're trying to put, like, I only sleep 4 hours a night. Like, it's almost kind of cool that they can do that, right? Like that, that they can look for not sleeping as much because it's sort of the total opposite of an insomniac, right? Um, so I think those messages are for them because even when anything you read about health is like, make sure you eat well, make sure you get enough sleep. And I'm like, they act like getting enough sleep is like eating a spinach, like you can control that. And so I think that's a disservice. Even a friend of mine had given me a book, like, I forgot I think it's called like Why We Sleep or
Yeah, why
something.
we sleep. Oh my gosh.
And I didn't read it. I was like,
Oh,
because at that point, I had already been introduced to your channel, and I was like, I do not need this information in my life, like, especially right now when I'm stressing about how, bad it is and unhealthy. I mean, I was like, I'm gonna get Alzheimer's because I'm not sleeping. I'm gonna like dementia surely probably tomorrow it's gonna happen, right? Because I'm not sleeping well. So yeah, that really helped me like go, okay, is this really that dangerous? And then, I started thinking about like people who have I've never had kids, so I, haven't had that experience of like being up all night and still having to function. Um, so yeah, like I said, I kind of built up to this for a long time in my life, like because I thought, oh, it was this stressful experience. But yeah, my therapist reflected, I think you've been working your way for a long time. And finally, it was like the straw that broke the camel's back, and
yeah.
then everything fell apart.
Which is a very, very difficult time, but it did lead to like, these insights and things that I'm sure will be with you for the rest of your life and be really helpful. So yeah, I'll just say, thanks so much, Ryan, for being a guest. It was wonderful having you here, and please be in touch.
Yeah, thanks for all the work you do. I really appreciate it. It's really been a lifesaver, and I probably think you don't know how much, but I just want you to know that. And to the community that comes on your channel and offers their experience, that's really valuable to so many people.
Yeah, yeah, no, I really appreciate what you said, and I forgot to say that. I meant to say this in the beginning, but I really appreciate you being here and everybody else who comes on to share. So let's conclude there. Again, Ryan, super nice meeting and be in touch.
All right, thanks. Take care.